A Course in Miracles, the Complete and Annotated Edition. Chapter 1, Section 1. Miracle Principles number 31. Miracles should inspire gratitude, not awe. Human beings should thank God for what they really are. The children of God are very holy, and the miracle honors their holiness. Note number 2. God's creations cannot lose their holiness, even though their holiness can be hidden. The miracle uncovers their holiness and brings their holiness into the light where your holiness belongs. Holiness can never be really hidden in darkness, but a person can deceive themselves on this point. This illusion makes you fearful because in your heart you know it's an illusion. Your darkness, your feeling of guilt makes you fearful because in your heart you know that your guilt is an illusion. As with all illusions, you exert enormous efforts to establish your guilt, your ego's validity. But the miracle sets validity where it belongs. External, eternal validity belongs only to the Spirit. Eternal validity belongs only to the Spirit. The miracle acknowledges only the truth. The miracle in this way dispels a person's illusions about themselves and puts them into communion with their self and with God. Your higher self, Miracle Principle 32. Your higher self, your true self, your Christed self inspires all miracles, which are essentially intercessions. Miracles intercede for a person's sinlessness and make them holy. Miracles place you beyond the physical laws and raise you into the sphere of celestial order, and in this order you are perfect. Note number 2 on Miracle Principle 32. The Spirit never loses its communion with God. Only the mind needs healing. The miracle joins in the healing plan of your higher self by placing the mind in the service of Spirit. When you place your mind in the service of Spirit, this establishes the proper function of your mind and then abolishes your mind's errors. Miracle Principle number 33. Miracles honor a person because they are lovable. Miracles dispel your illusions about yourself, and that's because miracles perceive the light in you. Miracles in this way correct your errors by freeing you from your nightmares about yourself. Miracles release you from a prison in which you have imprisoned yourself. And by freeing your mind from your illusions, from your self-deceptions, miracles restore you to your right mind and place you at the feet of love. Your mind can be possessed by illusions, but the spirit is eternally free. If a mind expresses without love, a mind can make an empty shell, and an empty shell can be possessed by evil thoughts. But A Course in Miracles restores your mind to its proper place. And unless there is emptiness in your mind, then there is no danger. And emptiness is a false creation. Unless there is emptiness, there cannot be any danger. And emptiness in your mind is a false creation. The mind that serves the Spirit is invulnerable, in other words. Unless there is an emptiness in your mind, there could be no danger. And emptiness in your mind is a false creation. In other words, the mind that serves the Spirit is invulnerable. Miracle principle number 34. The miracle, or the right thought, restores the mind to the fullness of spirit. And by correcting the idea of lack, the right thought, or the miracle, establishes perfect protection. By correcting the idea of lack, the right thought, the miracle, establishes perfect protection. The strength of the Spirit leaves no room for intrusions. And note number 2 on Miracle Principle 34. The forgiven are filled with the Spirit, and the Spirit of the forgiven forgives in return. It is the duty of the forgiven, the released, to release others. And that's because the forgiven are the means of the great awakening, the great undoing. And those released by their higher mind have got to join the higher mind in releasing others, because this is the plan for the healing of man. Miracle principle number 35. Miracles are a way in which minds that serve the Spirit unite with the higher mind for the release of all of God's creations. And note number 2, there are certain advantages in being a psychologist. A major advantage in being a psychologist is the understanding of projection and the extent of projection's results. Possession is very closely related to projection. So-called Lucifer could literally be translated light bearer. Lucifer literally projected himself from heaven. Note number 3. Projection still has this hurling connotation, because projection involves hurling something you do not want and regard as dangerous and frightening to someone else. And hurling to someone else what you don't like in yourself and what you perceive as dangerous in yourself, and hurling it to someone else, well, that is the opposite of the golden rule. And having placed this golden rule upside down, then the reverse of miracles or projection follows automatically. The correction lies in accepting what is true in yourself by bringing all that you are into the light. Note number 4. One of the major problems with miracle workers is that they are so sure that what they are doing is right because they know that what they are doing stems from love. And they are so sure that what they are doing is right that the miracle workers frequently do not pause to let me, their teacher, establish my limits. While what you do comes from me, says our teacher, the miracles often cannot be induced. While what the miracle workers do comes from me, says our teacher, the miracle workers often cannot be induced to ask me each time whether I want them to perform this particular miracle. And if the miracle workers did ask their teacher, their higher mind, if the higher mind wanted them to perform this particular miracle, then the miracle workers would not perform any miracles that could not get through to another constructively. And so the miracle workers would thus save themselves unnecessary strain. Instead, some miracle workers burn themselves out with indiscriminate miracles. And to this extent that they are burning themselves out with the unnecessary strain of working indiscriminate miracles, which means miracles they didn't ask first if the higher mind wanted them to perform. This, to the extent that they're doing this, they are not fulfilling their own purpose. Note number 5. The answer to miracle worker burnout and unnecessary strain from performing miracles that you haven't been asked to perform, the answer to that is to never perform a miracle without asking your teacher if you should, your higher mind, your teacher. And by asking your higher mind teacher what miracles you should perform, that spares you from exhaustion. Just because miracles are expressions of love, it does not follow that miracles that you do will always be effective. And then our teacher says, I am the only one who can perform miracles indiscriminately because I am the healing plan. Now you have a role in the healing plan of man, which I will dictate to you, says our teacher. Note number 6. Remember, you already have a principle about the involuntary nature of miracles. And we have also established the fact that everything involuntary belongs under the control of your higher mind, not your control. Under the control of your higher mind, miracles replenish the doer as well as the receiver. Under higher mind control, the miracles you do will replenish you as well as the miracle receiver. Miracle workers must learn higher mind control to replace their former habits, which did produce scarcity in place of abundance. From errors of scarcity, from errors of this kind, from errors of scarcity, the sense of deprivation is inevitable, but very easily corrected. Possession really means not under truth control, not under higher mind control. Possession really means not under higher mind control, thus making your mind vulnerable to projection. If your mind is not under higher mind control, then your mind is vulnerable to projection. And the idea of earth-bound entities entering into bodies really refers to being, quote, taken over, unquote, by your own earth-bound thoughts. The idea of earth-bound entities entering into bodies, possession, really refers to being taken over by your own earth-bound thoughts. Being taken over by your own earth-bound thoughts, this is demon possession. After all, Lucifer fell, but Lucifer was still an angel. Lucifer is thus the symbol for humanity. And the correction of the ego is the knowledge that the belief that angels cannot fall. Correction is the knowledge that the belief that angels can fall is false. Correction is the knowledge that the belief that angels can fall is false. It is true that mind can make projections as well as miracles, but it's not true that projections are real. Any psychologist should understand this. And this is what is meant by the truth shall set you free. Correction and healing is being released from the possession of your own earth-bound thoughts, your own projections. This is what is meant by know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Note number 8. You need to understand the very important difference between higher mind control and higher mind guidance. Higher mind controlled miracles are part of the healing plan, but higher mind guidance is personal, and higher mind guidance leads to personal release. Higher mind controlled miracles are part of the healing plan of man, but higher mind guidance is personal and leads to personal release. The impersonal nature of miracles is an essential ingredient because this enables love to control miracles' distribution as love sees fit, as your higher mind sees fit. Higher mind guidance, on the other hand, leads to the highly personal experience of revelation. And this is why it involves personal choice. Higher mind guidance involves personal choice because it is a highly personal guidance, which leads to highly personal revelation. Higher mind guidance leads to personal guidance, which leads to the personal, highly personal experience of revelation. A guide does not control by definition, but a guide does direct, leaving the following up to you. Lead us not into temptation means guide us out of our own errors. Lead us not into temptation means guide us out of our own errors. Note that the word lead, not order. Note that the word is lead, not order. Take up thy cross and follow me should be interpreted to mean recognize your errors and choose to abandon them by following my guidance, says our teacher. Note number 9. When you are afraid of possession, you need only remember that error cannot really threaten truth. Truth which always can withstand error's assaults. Only the error is really vulnerable. Only the error is really vulnerable. These so-called princes of this world, unquote, are princes only because they are really angels. But the princes of this world, the angels, they are free to establish their kingdom where they see fit. You are free to establish your kingdom where you see fit. And if you will remember that all princes inherit their power from their father, then the right choice becomes inevitable. Remember this, spirit is in the state of grace forever. Your reality is only spirit, therefore you are in a state of grace forever. And the correction plan undoes all errors in that respect, which means uproots the real source of fear. The healing plan uproots the source of fear by reminding you that spirit is in a state of grace forever, and your reality is only spirit. Therefore, you are in a state of grace forever. And remembering this is how the healing undoing plan uproots the source of your fear. Whenever love's reassurances are experienced as threat, it is always because you are defending your misplaced and misdirected love and loyalty. That's the only time. Whenever the truth's reassurances, or whenever the course's reassurances are experienced as a threat, it's always because you are defending misguided and misplaced and misdirected love and loyalty. That is what projection always involves. Defending misdirected and misplaced love and loyalty. So-called casting spells merely means affirming error, and error is lack of love. When somebody projects this lack of love onto another, this person does imprison the other. When someone projects a lack of love onto another, they do imprison the other, but only to the extent that you are reinforcing the errors that the other person already has made. You are imprisoning them, but only to the extent that you're reinforcing errors they've already made. Now, these distortions that they have already made makes them vulnerable to the curse of others. since these folks have already cursed themselves. But the miracle worker can only bless. The miracle worker can only bless others, and blessing others undoes the curse and frees the soul from prison. Miracles are examples of right thinking. Miracle Principle 36. Miracles are examples of right thinking. Through miracles, reality contact at all levels becomes strong and accurate, thus permitting correct delineation of intrapersonal and interpersonal boundaries. Through miracles, reality contact at all levels becomes strong and accurate. And when reality contact becomes strong and accurate, that permits correct delineation of intrapersonal and interpersonal boundaries. As a result of the miracle and the reality contact at all levels, the doer of miracles sees the truth as God created it. And this is what is meant by the principle on perspective adjustment. Miracle Principle number 37. A miracle is a correction factor introduced into false thinking by me. A miracle acts as a catalyst, shaking up erroneous perception and snapping it into place. Note number 2 on Miracle Principle number 37. This correction factor, the miracle, places you under the atonement principle, the healing plan principle, where your perception is healed. This correction factor, the miracle, places you under the healing plan principle where your perception is healed. And until this has occurred, perception of the divine order is impossible. True depth perception becomes possible only at the highest order of perceptual integration. True depth perception becomes possible only at the highest order of perceptual integration. Miracle Principle number 38. The spiritual eye is the mechanism of miracles, because what the spiritual eye perceives is true. Note number 2. The spiritual eye perceives both the creations of God and the products of human beings. Among the products of human beings, the spiritual eye can also separate the true from the false by the ability of the spiritual eye to perceive totally rather than selectively. The spiritual eye thus becomes the proper instrument for reality testing. Reality testing, which always involves the necessary distinction between the true and the false. To test reality, for reality testing, it's necessary to be able to distinguish between the true and the false. Miracle Principle number 39. The miracle dissolves error because the spiritual eye identifies error as false or unreal. And this is the same as saying that by seeing the light, darkness automatically disappears. Darkness is a lack of light. And as a lack of light, darkness does not have unique properties of its own. Darkness is just an example of the scarcity fallacy from which only error can proceed. But truth is always abundant. Scarcity leads to overeating and other false drives. Abundance eliminates overeating and other false drives. Those who perceive and acknowledge that they have everything have no need for driven behavior of any kind. Miracle principle number 40. Miracles are a blessing from parents to children. And this is just another way of phrasing the earlier principle about, quote, by those who have more, for those who have less. Children do not belong to parents, but children do need to share their parents' greater abundance. If children are deprived, their perception becomes distorted. And when a child's perception becomes distorted, the whole family of God or the sonship is impaired in their relationships. Ultimately, every member of the family of God must return. And the miracle calls every member of the family of God to return, because the miracle blesses every member of the family of God and honors them even though they may be absent in spirit. Miracle principle number 41. The miracle acknowledges all men as your brothers and mine. A miracle is a way of perceiving the universal mark of God in others. A miracle is a way of perceiving the universal mark of God in others. This is the true, quote, strawberry mark of brotherhood. Your false ideas about your own exclusion from universal love is both fallacious and arrogant. Your real specialness doesn't stem from exclusion, but from inclusion. All my brothers and sisters are special. You should stop interpreting this as all except me. You interpreting that you believing that everyone is special except you, that is ridiculous. The implied lack of love that this version contains is way off the mark and misses the level of right thinking entirely. You must heal your perception in this respect. You must work a miracle on behalf of yourself here. See the principle about miracles as perception correction. You must work a miracle on behalf of yourself here before you can extend miracles as creative energizers, which they are. 50 million Frenchmen can be wrong, because the notion is too fragmented. What can't be wrong is the universal sonship of which you are a part. The quote, "God is not mocked," that quote may arouse anticipation of punishment, but it is really a reassurance. God would be mocked if any of God's creations lacked innocence and holiness. The creation is whole, and the mark of wholeness is holiness. The mark of wholeness is holiness, not holes. The mark of wholeness is holiness, not holes. The family of God has no holes anywhere. Remember, God is not mocked under any circumstance. That's the same as saying there are no holes in creation. Miracle principle number 42. Wholeness is the perceptual content of the miracle. Wholeness is the perceptual content of miracles. And the idea of wholeness in this way corrects the faulty perception of lack. We can now return to the fundamental distinction between miracles and projection. The stimulus must precede the response, and the stimulus must also determine or at least influence the kind of response that is evoked. The relationship of stimulus and response is extremely intimate. The behavioristic terminology is because this part deals with behavior. Behavior is response. So the question, quote, "response to what?" becomes crucial. Stimuli of all kinds are identified through perception. Stimuli of all kinds are identified through perception. In other words, you perceive the stimulus and behave accordingly. It follows then that as ye perceive, so will ye behave. As ye perceive, so will ye behave. Consider the golden rule again. You are asked to behave toward others as you would have them behave toward you. But this means that your perception of both must be accurate, since the golden rule is the order for appropriate behavior. But you can't behave appropriately unless you perceive accurately, because appropriate behavior depends on lack of level confusion. The presence of level confusion always results in variable reality testing, and hence in variability in behavioral appropriateness. All forms of debasing yourself images are fundamental. All forms of debasing your self-images are fundamental perceptual distortions, and they inevitably produce either self-contempt or projection onto others, and usually both. All forms of debasing your self-image are fundamental perceptual distortions, which produce either self-contempt, self-hatred, or projection onto others, and usually both. Since you and your neighbor are equal members of the same family, as you perceive both, so will you behave toward both. The way to perceive for the golden rule behavior is to look out from the perception of your own holiness and perceive the holiness of others. The way to perceive for the golden rule behavior is to look out from the perception of your own innocence and see the innocence of others. Note the very old Jewish practice of changing the name of a person who is very ill, so that when the list is given to the angel of death, the person with that name will not be found. Well, this was actually a distortion of a revelation about how to alter or avert death. The revelation's proper content was that those who, quote, change their mind, not their name, about destruction or hate do not need to die. That was the original meaning of that idea that got distorted into the old, very old Jewish practice of changing the name of a person who is very ill, so that when the list is given to the angel of death, the person with that name will not be found. That was just actually a distortion of a revelation about how to alter or avert death. The revelation's proper content was that those who, quote, change their mind, not their name, about destruction or hate do not need to die. Death is a human affirmation of a belief in hate. Death is a human affirmation of a belief in hate. And that's why the Bible says there is no death. And that is why I demonstrated that death does not exist. Remember that I came to fulfill the law by reinterpreting it. The law itself, if properly understood, offers only protection. It's those who have not yet changed their minds who have entered the hellfire concept into the law. Remember, I said before that just because nature abhors a vacuum, it does not follow that the vacuum is filled with hellfire. The emptiness engendered by fear should be replaced by love. Because love and love's absence are in the same dimension, and true correction cannot be undertaken except within a dimension. Otherwise, there has been a confusion of levels. You need considerable clarification of the channel role. If you ask somebody what they believe before you tell them what you believe, if you ask somebody what they believe before you tell them what you believe, then you are implying that you will say what he approves. If you ask somebody what they believe before you tell them what you believe, then you are implying that you will say what they approve. This is not the real authority. The right way to complete the sentence that starts when they told me what to do is, I referred the question to the only real authority. When they told me what to do, that incomplete sentence is, the right way to complete the sentence that starts when they told me what to do is, I referred the question to the only real authority. The incomplete sentence that begins when they told me what to do should be, I referred the answer, the ending of that incomplete sentence when they told me what to do. The right way to complete that sentence is, I referred the question to the only real authority. The Bible says, to everyone then who gives witness to me before men, I will witness before my Father in heaven. That's a quote from the Bible. Well, that quotation really means that you represent or witness for the authority in whom you believe. You're witnessing to the authority. You're witnessing for the authority in whom you believe. Demonstrates your belief and thus strengthens your belief. I assure you that I will witness for anyone who lets me, says our teacher, and I will witness to whatever extent that they themselves permit me to witness for them. Those who witness for me are expressing through their miracles that they have abandoned deprivation in favor of the abundance they have learned belongs to them. Miracle principle number 43. A major contribution of miracles is their strength in releasing a person from their misplaced sense of isolation, deprivation, and lack. Miracles are affirmations of sonship, which is a state of completion and abundance. The emphasis on changing your mind needs further clarification. Whatever is true and real is eternal and cannot change or be changed. The Spirit is therefore unalterable because the Spirit is already perfect. But the mind can elect the level it chooses to serve. The only limit which is put on the mind's choice is that the mind cannot serve two masters. While the ballot itself is a secret one, and the right to vote is fully protected, voting always entails both election and rejection. If two candidates are voted for the same position, the machine cancels the ballot automatically. This is necessary because a split vote does not represent any real allegiance. That's why a mind cannot serve two masters. And when you're making a choice for both at the same time, your choice has no meaning or value. A split vote does not represent any real allegiance. Free will is the attribute of the mind, not the spirit. The spirit always remains changeless because spirit never leaves the sight of God. The creation of the spirit is already fully accomplished. The mind, if the mind votes to do so, can become a medium by which the spirit can create along the lines of its own creation, if it chooses to. The mind, if it votes to do so, becomes a medium by which the spirit can create along the lines of its own creation. And if a mind does not freely elect to become a medium by which the spirit can create along the lines of its own creation, then the mind retains this creative ability, but then the mind places itself under tyrannous rather than authoritative control. And as a result of a mind placing itself under tyrannous rather than authoritative control, then what the mind makes is imprisonment. Because imprisonment is the dictate of tyrants. To change your mind means to place your mind at the disposal of true authority. I place my mind at the disposal of true authority. The miracle is thus a sign that the mind has elected to be guided by the higher self in love's service. The abundance of your true self, your Christed self, is the natural result of choosing to follow your higher mind, your Christed self. The following is in relation to the question of sex. You are involved with unconscious distortions which are producing a dense cover over miracle impulses, making it hard for miracle impulses to reach consciousness. Sex and miracles are both ways of relating. The nature of any interpersonal relationship is limited or defined by what you want that interpersonal relationship to do, which is why you want that interpersonal relationship in the first place. And two examples of interpersonal relationship is miracles and sex. And miracles and sex are both ways of relating, interrelating. And the nature of any interpersonal relationship is limited or defined by what you want that personal relationship to do. Which is why you want that interpersonal relationship in the first place, for what it can do, what you want it to do. Relating is a way of achieving an outcome. Indiscriminate sexual impulses result in body image misperceptions. Indiscriminate sexual impulses result in body image misperceptions. And indiscriminate sexual impulses is an expression of an indiscriminate attempt to reach communication through the body. Attempting to reach communication through the body involves not only improper self-identification, but also disrespect for the individuality of others. Now, self-control, as opposed to indiscriminate sexual impulses, self-control is not the whole answer to the problem of indiscriminate sexual impulses, though I am by no means discouraging its use. I am by no means discouraging the use of self-control when it comes to indiscriminate sexual impulses. It must be understood, however, that the underlying mechanism within the indiscriminate sexual impulses must be uprooted. In other words, all shallow roots have to be uprooted, because all shallow roots, all indiscriminate physical impulses, all shallow roots have to be uprooted, because all shallow roots, all indiscriminate physical impulses are not deep enough to sustain you. The illusion that shallow roots, or the illusion that indiscriminate sexual impulses can be deepened and thus made to hold, is one of the corollaries on which the reversal of the golden rule, referred twice before, is balanced. As these false underpinnings, as these shallow roots are uprooted or given up, equilibrium is experienced as unstable at first. But the fact is that nothing is less stable than an upside down orientation that you had before with your shallow roots. Anything that holds your shallow roots, anything that holds your shallow roots in their unstable condition is hardly conducive to greater stability. The whole danger of defenses lies in the propensity of defenses to hold misperceptions rigidly in place. That is why rigidity is regarded as stability for those who are off the mark. Rigidity is regarded as stability to those who are off the mark. A rigid orientation can be extremely reliable, even if that rigid orientation is upside down. In fact, the more consistently upside down a rigid orientation is, the more reliable that orientation or that person's orientation is. The more upside down is the orientation of someone who is holding that orientation rigidly, the more reliable, which means consistent, it is. One of the more horrible examples of inverted or upside down thinking, and history is full of horrible examples of this, was the Nazis' quote, final solution, unquote. I shed many tears over this, but it is by no means the only time I said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. All actions which stem from reversed thinking are literally the behavioral expressions of those who know not what they do. Actually, Jean Dixon was right in her emphasis on, quote, feet on the ground and fingertips in the heaven, unquote. Although Jean Dixon was too literal for some, many people knew exactly what she meant, so her statement was the right miracle for them. Feet on the ground, and fingertips in heaven. I submit that if a mind is in valid relationship with God, that mind can't be upside down. If a mind is in valid relationship with God, then that mind can't be upside down, and its perception can't be distorted. Many have lost sight of the end and are concentrating on the means. Remember the story about the artist who kept devoting himself to inventing better and better ways of sharpening pencils? That artist never created anything, but he had the sharpest pencil in town. The sexual language here is intentional. Sex is often utilized on behalf of very similar errors. Hostility, triumph, vengeance, self-debasement, and all sorts of expressions of the lack of love are often very clearly seen in the accompanying sexual fantasies. But it is a profound error to imagine that because these sexual fantasies that involve vengeance, triumph, self-debasement, hostility, and all sorts of expressions of lack of love, it's a profound error to imagine that just because these fantasies are so frequent, which means occur so reliably, that this implies validity. Just because these errors, these fantasies, these sexual fantasies that involve debasement and violence and lack of love, just because these sexual fantasies occur so frequently, which means reliably, that doesn't imply validity to these fantasies. In other words, you can be wholly reliable and entirely wrong. Intellect may be a, quote, displacement upward, but sex can be a displacement outward. How can you, quote, come close to others through the parts of you which are really invisible? The word invisible means cannot be seen or perceived. What cannot be perceived is hardly the right means for improving perception. The confusion of Mirakl impulses with sexual impulses is a major source of perceptual distortion. Because this confusion of Mirakl impulses with sexual impulses induces rather than straightens out the basic level confusion which underlies all those who seek happiness with the instruments of the world. The confusion of Mirakl impulses with sexual impulses is a major source of perceptual distortion, because it is the basic level confusion which underlies all those who seek happiness with the instruments of the world. A desert is a desert is a desert. In other words, you can do anything you want in a desert, but you cannot change the desert from what it is. The desert still lacks water, which is why it is a desert. And the only thing to do with a desert is to leave. Mirakl principle number 44. Miracles arise from a miraculous state of mind. This miraculous state of mind goes out to anyone, even without the awareness of the miracle worker themselves. The impersonal nature of miracles is because the plan for the healing of man itself is one. And by this healing plan being one, this healing plan unites all creations with their Creator. Miracle principle number 45. The miracle is an expression of an inner awareness of your higher, your Christed self, and an acceptance of its healing. The mind is then in a state of grace. Once your mind has accepted the correction or the healing of your higher mind, your real self, then your mind is in a state of grace. And then your mind naturally becomes gracious, both to the host within and the stranger without. Once you have accepted the correction of the higher mind in you, then your mind is in a state of grace. And then your mind naturally becomes gracious, both to the host within and to the stranger without. And by bringing in the stranger, that stranger becomes your brother, your sister. The miracle of healing is to bring those who are estranged from each other together because they are estranged from God. The miracles you are told not to perform have not lost their value. The miracles you've been told not to perform, they are still expressions of your own state of grace. But the action aspect of the miracle should be controlled by your higher mind because of the higher mind's complete awareness of the whole plan. The impersonal nature of miracle-mindedness ensures your own grace, but only your higher mind, your real self, is in a position to know where grace can be bestowed. Miracle principle number 46. A miracle is never lost. A miracle touches many people you may not even know. And sometimes a miracle produces undreamed of changes in forces of which you are not even aware. But that's not your concern. The miracle will always also bless you. And that the miracle will always bless you too, that's not your concern either. But it is the concern of the record, which always measures what the record was supposed to measure. I want to finish the instructions about sex, because this is an area which the miracle worker must understand. Inappropriate sexual drives or misdirected miracle impulses result in guilt if expressed, and they result in depression if those impulses are denied. We said before that all real pleasure comes from doing God's will. And whenever God's will is not done, an experience of lack results. And this is because not doing the will of God is a lack of self. Sex was intended as an instrument for physical creation. See previous notes. An instrument to enable souls to embark on new chapters in their experience. Sex was intended as an instrument for physical creation to enable souls to embark on new chapters in their experience. It was a means to an end that we focused on instead of the end. And it says that sex was intended as an instrument for physical creation to enable souls to embark on new chapters in their experience and thus improve their records. For souls to improve their records. The pencil was not an end in itself. For the artist, the pencil, the instrument, shouldn't have been the end in itself. Just like sex shouldn't be an end in itself. It should be an instrument by which souls can embark on new chapters of their experience and thus improve of their records. In other words, the pencil was not an end in itself. The pencil, in that earlier metaphor, was an aid to the artist in the artist's own creative endeavors. Just like sex should be nothing more than an instrument in your own creative endeavors, not the end in itself. As we made new homes for souls through sex, and guided these souls through the periods of their own developmental readiness, we learned the role of the Creator Father ourselves. As we made new homes for souls through sex, and guided these souls through the periods of their own developmental readiness, that's how we learned the role of the Father Creator ourselves. The whole process of creating and making new homes for souls was set up as a learning experience in gaining grace. The pleasure which is derived from sex, as such, is reliable only because it stems from an error which people shared. Awareness of the error produces guilt. Denial of the error results in projection. Correction of the error brings release. The only valid use of sex is procreation. It is not truly pleasurable in itself. Sex is not truly pleasurable in itself. Lead us not into temptation means do not let us deceive ourselves into believing that we can relate in peace to God or to others with anything external. The, quote, sin of Onan, unquote, was called a sin because it involved a related type of self-delusion, namely, that pleasure without relating can exist. What's the delusion? That pleasure without relating can exist. Pleasure without relating can exist. That is the self-delusion that is referred to in the so-called sin of Onan. The concept of either the self or another as a sex object epitomizes this strange reversal. This strange reversal, believing that pleasure without relating can exist. This strange reversal, it is objectionable, but only because it is invalid. Upside down logic produces this kind of thinking. Believing that you can relate, relate in peace to God or to anyone with anything external. Child of God, you were created to create the good, the beautiful, and the holy. Do not lose sight of this. Invite me to enter anywhere temptation arises, says our teacher. And then says our teacher, I will change that relationship from one of inappropriate sexual attraction to one of impersonal miracle working. And this is the real meaning of changing the channel for libidinal expression. The love of God, for a little while, must still be expressed through one body to another. And that is because the real vision is still so dim. And so everyone can best use their body by enlarging the perception of others so that the others can see the real vision. Everyone can use their body best by enlarging the perception of others so that others can see the real vision. This real vision is invisible to the physical eye. And so the ultimate purpose of the body is to render the body itself unnecessary. And learning how to render the body itself unnecessary, that's the only real reason for the body's existence. We said before that prayer is the medium of miracles. And so the miracle prayer is, if you will tell me what to do, I will do it. If you will tell me what to do, love, I will do it. That is the miracle prayer. This miracle prayer is the door that leads out of the desert forever. But this, however, is not a complete statement, because this statement does not exclude the negative. In other words, we have already told you to add the thought and not to do those you would not have me do in connection with miracles. So it should go like this, the miracle prayer. If you will tell me what to do, I will do it, and I will not do what you would not have me do in connection with miracles. The distinction has also been made here between miracle-mindedness as a state and miracle doing as its expression. Miracle-mindedness is a state, and miracle doing is its expression. The former, miracle-mindedness, needs your careful protection. Miracle-mindedness needs your careful protection because miracle-mindedness is a state of miracle readiness. Miracle-mindedness is a state of miracle readiness. And this is what the Bible means in the references to, quote, hold yourself ready, and other similar injunctions. Readiness here means keeping your perception right side up so that you will always be ready, willing, and able. These are the essentials for listen, learn, and do. You must be ready to listen, willing to learn, and able to do. And this is what it means to be ready always. Ready to listen, willing to learn, and able to do. These are the essentials for the injunction, listen, learn, and do. Ready to listen, you must be ready to listen, willing to learn, and able to do. Only the last one, able to do, is involuntary because it is the application of miracles, which must be higher mind controlled. But the other two, which are the voluntary aspects of miracle-mindedness, are up to you. The voluntary aspects of doing miracles is ready to listen, willing to learn, but doing, that's the involuntary aspect of being ready to do miracles. To channelize does have a, quote, narrowing down connotation, though not in the sense of lack. Channelizing has a narrowing connotation, but not in the sense of lack. The underlying state of mind or grace is a total commitment. Only the doing aspect of the miracle involves channelizing. And this is because doing miracles is always specific. A channel must learn to do only what the channel is supposed to do. The prayer for the channel should therefore read, "If you will tell me what to do, only that will I do," is the prayer for the channel, for the medium, for the teacher of truth. If you will tell me what to do, only that I will do. Revelation is literally unspeakable because revelation is an experience of unspeakable love. And the word awe, that should be reserved only for revelation, to which awe is perfectly, to which revelation is perfectly and correctly, to which the word awe should be reserved only for revelation, to which it is perfectly and correctly applicable. Awe should be reserved only for revelation. Awe is not appropriately applied to miracles because a state of true awe is worshipful. A state of true awe implies that one of a lesser order stands before the greater one, and it's only the case where one of a lesser order stands before the greater one. That is only the case when a child of God stands before their Creator. The children of God are perfect creations, and they should be struck with awe in the presence of the Creator of perfection. The miracle, on the other hand, is a sign of love among equals. The equal cannot be in awe of each other because awe always implies inequality. And that's why awe is not properly experienced even in relation to me, your elder brother, and I kneel beside you, facing the light, says our teacher. An elder brother is entitled to respect for his greater experience, and an elder brother is entitled to obedience for his greater wisdom. And an elder brother is also entitled to love because he is a brother. And an elder brother is also entitled to devotion if that elder brother is devoted. And our teacher says to us, it's only my devotion that entitles me to your devotion. And our teacher says, I have knelt at your altar as readily as I would ever have you kneel at mine. There is nothing about me that you cannot attain. That's because I have nothing that doesn't come from God. The main difference between us as yet is that I have nothing else besides what comes from God. And that leaves me, says our teacher, in a state of true holiness, which is only a potential in you. That quote, "No man cometh unto the Father but by me," well, that is among the most misunderstood statements in the Bible. It doesn't mean that I am in any way separate or different from you except in time. Now we know that time does not exist. Actually, the statement is much more meaningful if it's considered on a vertical rather than a horizontal axis. Regarded along the vertical, humanity stands below me and I stand below God. And in the process of rising up, I am higher. In the process of rising up, I am higher. This is because without me, the distance between God and humanity is too great for you to encompass. And so I bridge the distance as an elder brother on the one hand and as a son of God on the other hand. And my devotion to my brothers has placed me in charge of the family of God, which I can render complete only to the extent I can share the family of God. Now, me being above you and me and you being below me on a vertical axis, in that as you rise up, you meet me, this appears to contradict another statement, the statement, I and my Father are one. It doesn't contradict that statement. There are still separate parts in the statement in recognition of the fact that the Father is greater. Actually, the original statement was are of one kind. The original statement was I and the Father are of one kind. That was the original version of that statement, the statement I and my Father are one. The original statement was I and my Father are of a like kind, are of one kind. The Father and the Son are not identical, but you can say like Father, like Son. Your loving right mind, your higher mind, is the bringer of revelations. Revelations are indirectly inspired by me because I am close to the higher mind and I am alert to revelation readiness in my brothers and sisters. And that's why I can in this way bring down to others, my brothers and sisters, more than they can draw down to themselves. Dixon's description is perhaps a better statement of my position, because my feet are on the ground and my hands are in heaven. I can bring down the glories of heaven to my brothers and sisters on earth. The higher mind in you is the highest communication medium. The Holy Spirit, your loving right mind, is the highest communication medium. Now, miracles do not involve this type of communication because miracles are temporary communicative devices. When the family of God can return to its original form of communication with God by direct revelation, then the need for miracles is over. Your loving right mind mediates higher to lower order communication, keeping the direct channel from God to humanity open for revelation. Revelation is not reciprocal. Revelation is always from God to you, but not from you to God. And that revelation is always from God to you. That is because God and you are not equal. The miracle, on the other hand, is reciprocal because the miracle always involves equality. Miracle Principle number 47. Number 47. The miracle is a learning device. A learning device which lessens the need for time. In the longitudinal or the horizontal plane, the true equality of all the members of the sonship appears to involve almost endless time. But we know that time is only an artifact introduced as a learning aid. The sudden shift from horizontal to vertical perception, which the miracle entails, introduces an interval from which the doer and the receiver both emerge much farther along in time than they would otherwise have been. The sudden shift from horizontal to vertical perception introduces an interval from which the doer and the receiver both emerge much farther along in time than they would have otherwise have been. A miracle has thus the unique property of abolishing time to the extent of rendering the space of time the miracle occupies unnecessary. There is no relation between the time a miracle takes and the time a miracle covers, in other words. And so a miracle substitutes for learning that might have taken thousands of years. And the miracle substitutes for learning that may have taken thousands of years by the underlying recognition of perfect equality and holiness between doer and receiver, on which the miracle rests. The miracle is unstable but perfectly consistent. That is, the miracle does not occur predictably across time, and the miracle rarely recurs in comparable forms, but within itself, the miracle is completely consistent. Since the miracle contains nothing but an acknowledgement of equality and worth, then all parts of the miracle are equal. We said before that the miracle abolishes time, and the miracle abolishes time by a process of collapsing time. And as the miracle collapses time, the miracle thus abolishes certain intervals within time. The miracle abolishes certain intervals within time, however, within the larger temporal sequence. In other words, a miracle establishes an out-of-pattern time interval, which is not under the usual laws of time. Only in this sense is the miracle timeless. By collapsing time, the miracle literally saves time, much the way daylight savings time saves time. The miracle rearranges the distribution of light, just like daylight savings time. Miracle Principle number 48. The miracle is the only device which you have at your immediate disposal for controlling time. Only revelation transcends time. Only revelation transcends the miracle, having nothing to do with time at all. The miracle is much like the body in that both the miracle and the body are learning aids which aim at facilitating a state in which both the body and the miracle are unnecessary. And when you are finally in the original state of direct communication, neither the body nor the miracle serves any purpose. While you are in the body, however, you can choose between loveless or miraculous channels of creativity. You can make an empty shell, but you do not make nothing at all. You can wait, in other words. You can delay, in other words. You can paralyze yourself, and you can reduce your creativity almost to nothing, and even induce a real developmental arrest or regression. But you cannot abolish your creativity. You can destroy your medium of communication, but you cannot destroy your potential. And that's because you were not created by your own free will. Only what you make is yours to decide. And so the basic decision of the miracle-minded is to not wait on time any longer than is necessary. Time can waste as well as be wasted. And the miracle worker therefore accepts the time control factor of the miracle gladly. I accept the time control factor of the miracle, and I accept it gladly, because I know that every collapse of time brings everyone closer to the ultimate release from time, in which the children of God and the Creator are one, or of one kind. The real meaning of one kind is of one mind or will. When the will of the children of God, when the will of the family of God and the Creator are one, their perfect accord is heaven. Equality does not imply homogeneity now. In other words, when everyone has everything, then individual contributions to the family of God will no longer be necessary. And when the healing plan of man has been completed, then all talents will be shared by all of the children of God. And that's because God is not partial. All of God's children have all of God's total love, and all of God's gifts are given freely to everyone alike. That's what it means to say God is not partial. All of God's children have all of God's total love, and all of God's gifts are given freely to everyone alike. And the quote, "Except ye become as little children," that quote means, unless you fully recognize your complete dependence on your Father, Mother, God, you cannot know the real power of yourself in your true relationship with your Creator. Unless you recognize your complete dependence on your Creator, then you cannot know the real power of you in your true relationship with your Creator. Your real power in your true relationship with your Creator. You do have special talents which are needed for the celestial speed up at this time. But note that the term speed up is not a term which relates to the transcending of time. When time is abolished and all the children of God have come home, then no special agents or talents will be necessary. But do not underestimate the power of the special agents or your special talents now. And do not underestimate the great need there is for your special talents, which are the special agents of the celestial speed up. You do have special talents which are needed for the celestial speed up at this time. But when time is abolished and all the children of God have come home, then no special agents or special talents will be necessary. But don't underestimate the power of your special talents, these special agents, now. And don't underestimate the great need for them now. I do not claim to be more than that myself, a special agent with some special talents. No one in their right mind ever wants either more or less than what everybody else has, what God has given to everybody. No one in their right mind ever wants more or less than what God has given to everyone. Those who are called on to witness for me now are witnessing for all people as I am now. Fantasies are distorted forms of thinking because fantasies always involve twisting perception into unreality. Fantasy is a debased form of vision. Visions and revelations are closely related. Fantasies and projection are more closely associated because both fantasy and projection attempt to control external reality according to false internal needs. Live and let live happens to be a very meaningful injunction. If you twist reality in any way, you are perceiving destructively. Reality was lost through usurpation, which in turn produced tyranny. And so now you must choose freely to devote your heritage to the greater restoration. And that's because as long as a single slave remains to walk the earth, your release is not complete. Complete restoration of the family of God is the only true goal of the miracle-minded. And sexual fantasies, they are distortions of perception by definition. Sexual fantasies are means of making false associations and obtaining pleasure from them. You can make false associations and obtain pleasure from them only because you are creative. But although you can perceive false associations, you can never make those false associations real except to yourself. And as we said before, you believe in what you make or create. If you make a miracle, you will be equally strong in your belief in miracles. And then the strength of your conviction will then sustain the belief of the miracle receiver. No fantasies, sexual or otherwise, are true. Fantasies become totally unnecessary as the wholly satisfying nature of reality becomes apparent. Fantasies, sexual or otherwise, become totally unnecessary as the wholly satisfying nature of reality becomes apparent. The sex impulse is a miracle impulse when in its proper focus. One individual sees in another the right partner for propagating the species and also for their joint establishment of a creative home. This does not involve fantasy at all. If I am asked to participate in the decision, then the decision will be a right one too. The choice of sex partners often involves a lack of love. And this, whatever happens, must be corrected. Sex partners are frequently selected precisely because they are not suited to gratify your fantasies. And this is not because you want to abandon or give up the fantasies, but because you are afraid of your fantasies, sexual or otherwise. You see in a partner a means of protecting against your fear of your sexual fantasies. But then you continue to look around for chances to indulge the fantasies. The dream of the perfect partner is an attempt to find external integration while retaining conflicting needs in the self. Some abandon the hope in a neurotic sense of despair of finding that perfect partner. Some abandon the hope of finding the perfect partner in a neurotic sense of despair of finding that perfect partner. Others insist the hope for finding the perfect partner is justified, but none of them are in their right mind. Either the one who is despairing of finding their perfect partner or the one who is still hopeful, insisting that the hope of finding the perfect partner is justified. None of them, neither of them, are in their right mind. The lack of love or the faulty need orientation which leads to a particular person choice can often be corrected. The lack of love which leads to a particular person choice can often be corrected within the existing framework. The relationship situation is questionable largely because of the relationship's inherent vulnerability to fantasy gratification. The relationship is questionable largely because of its inherent vulnerability to fantasy gratification. Doing the best you can within this limitation is often the best correction measure. Any relationship you have undertaken for whatever reasons becomes a responsibility. And if you shift your own needs, some amount of corresponding shift in the need orientation of the other person must result. This will be beneficial, even if the partner was originally attracted to you because of your disrespect. Teaching devices which are totally alien to a learner's perceptual system are usually merely disruptive. Transfer depends on some common elements in the new relationship which are understandable in terms of the old. So how can sexual impulses be directly translated into miracle impulses? Well, in a relationship where you or another person or both experience inappropriate sexual impulses, you're trying to get pleasure through a fantasy, know first that this is an expression of fear. You are trying to get pleasure in the relationship through fantasies, through inappropriate connections. Know first that this is an expression of fear. How can sexual impulses be directly translated into miracle impulses? Well, in a relationship or a situation where you or another person or both experience inappropriate sexual impulses, Know first that this is an expression of fear. Your love toward each other is not perfect, and this is why the fear arose. 2. Turn immediately to me by denying the power of the fear and ask me to help you replace it with love. This shifts the sexual impulse immediately to the Mirakl impulse and places the sexual impulse at my disposal. How can sexual impulses be directly translated into Mirakl impulses? Well, in a relationship or situation where you or another person or both experience inappropriate sexual impulses, know first that this sexual impulse is an expression of fear. Know that your love toward each other is not perfect, and that is why the inappropriate sexual impulse arose. And then turn immediately to me by denying the power of the sexual impulse and ask me to help you replace it with love. And this shifts the sexual impulse immediately to the Mirakl impulse and places it at my disposal. And then 3, acknowledge the true creative worth of both yourself and the other one. Acknowledge the true creative worth of both them and you, and that places strength where strength belongs. Note that sexual fantasies are always destructive or depleting, in that sexual fantasies perceive another in an inappropriate creative role. Both people are perceived essentially as objects, fulfilling their own pleasure drives. Both people are seeing the other person as an object in their attempt to fulfill their own pleasure drives. This dehumanized view is the source of the depleting use of sex. Freud's description is purely negative. That is, sex as a release from the unpleasant. Freud's description of sex and the sexual fantasy and the sexual attraction is purely negative. That is, sex as a release from the unpleasant. Freud also observed that the tension from id impulses never completely abates. What Freud should have said was that the shift from Mirakl impulses to sexual impulses was debilitating in the first place because of the level confusion involved. And because of this level confusion between body and mind, this set up a state in which real release was impossible. Note also that Freud's notion of sex was as a device for inducing relaxation, which Freud confused with peace. Inappropriate sex relaxes only in the sense that it may induce physical sleep. The Mirakl, on the other hand, is an energizer. Miracles, on the other hand, always strengthen and never deplete. A miracle does induce peace, and by establishing tranquility, not relaxation, the Mirakl enables both giver and receiver to enter into a state of grace. Here, the giver and the receiver, their miracle-mindedness, not released from tension, is restored. The miracles, the miracle-mindedness of the giver and the receiver is restored. Where, as in sex, the energy is depleted, and an effect is for both to fall asleep. Tension is the result of a building up of unexpressed miracle impulses. What is tension? It is the result of a building up of unexpressed miracle impulses. Now, this tension can be truly abated only by releasing the miracle drive which has been blocked. Converting the miracle drive to sexual libido merely produces further blocking. Never foster this illusion in yourself or encourage it in others. An object is incapable of release because an object is a concept which is devoid of creative power. An object is devoid of creative power. An object can never release. An object can never bring release. The recognition of the real creative power in yourself and others, that brings real release because it brings peace. So real release comes from the recognition of the real creative power in yourself and others. The peace of God which passeth understanding can keep your hearts now and forever. Only the peace of God which passes understanding can keep your hearts now and forever. Remember that you who want peace can only find it by complete forgiveness. You who want complete release, which is peace, can only find it through complete forgiveness. You never really wanted peace before, so there was no point in knowing how to get peace before. This is an example of the, quote, need to know principle, which was established by the plan of the healing of man long before the CIA. The need to know principle, that was established by the healing plan long before the CIA. No kind of knowledge is acquired by anyone unless they want that knowledge or believe in some way they need that knowledge. The following section will be the only one which deals with the concept of lack, because while the concept of lack does not exist in what God creates, the concept of lack is very apparent in what you make. The concept of lack is, in fact, the essential difference between what you have made and what God creates. A need implies lack by definition. Need involves the recognition, conscious or unconscious, that you would be better off in a state somehow different from the one you are in, is need. The concept of lack, the concept of need, is the belief that you would be better off in a state somehow different than the one you are in. And until the separation, which is a better term than the fall, nothing was lacking. And this meant that you had no needs at all. If you had not deprived yourself, you would never have experienced needs at all. And after the separation, needs became the most powerful sources of motivation for human action. All behavior is essentially motivated by needs, but behavior itself is not a divine attribute. The body is the mechanism for behavior. Nobody would bother even to get up and go from one place to another if he did not think he would somehow be better off. Believing that you could be better off is the reason why you have the mechanism for behavior, the body, at your disposal. That is what it means when it says, by their deeds you shall know them. You act according to the particular hierarchy of needs that you establish for yourself. And your hierarchy of needs you establish for yourself in turn depends on your perception of what you are. Your hierarchy of needs depends on your perception of what you are. That is what you lack. Your hierarchy of needs depends on your perception of what you are, depends on what you believe you lack. And what you believe you lack establishes your own rules for what you need to know. The separation from God is the only lack you really need to correct. Separation from God is the only lack you really need to correct. But your separation would never have occurred if you had not distorted your perception of truth and thus perceived yourself as lacking. The concept of any sort of need hierarchy arose because, having made this fundamental error, you had already fragmented yourself into levels with different needs. The different levels you fragmented yourself into relate to your hierarchy of needs that you perceive. And so as you integrate, you become one, and your needs become one accordingly. Only the fragmented can be confused about their one need. Internal integration within the self will not suffice to correct the lack fallacy, but internal integration will correct the need fallacy. Unified needs produces unified action, because unified need produces a lack of ambivalence. The concept of need hierarchy, a corollary to the original error, requires correction at its own level before the error of levels itself can be corrected. You cannot operate or behave effectively while you operate at split levels. But as long as you operate at split levels, you must introduce correction from the bottom level up. This is because you now operate in space, where up and down are meaningful terms. Ultimately, of course, space is as meaningless as time. The concept is really one of space-time belief. The physical world exists only because you can use it to correct your unbelief. The physical world, the space-time belief, the physical world exists only because you can use it to correct your unbelief, which placed you in the space-time belief originally. And that's because as long as you knew you did not need anything, then the whole device, the whole space-time belief device, was unnecessary. You can never control the effects of fear yourself, because you have made fear and believe in what you make. In attitude then, though not in content, you resemble your own Creator, who has perfect faith in His creations because God created them. And all creation rests on belief. And the belief in the creation produces its existence. This is why it is possible for you to believe what is not true for anyone else. It is true for you because it was made by you. This is why it is possible for you to believe what is not true for anyone else. It's true for you because it was made by you. And every aspect of fear proceeds from upside-down perception. The truly creative, they devote their efforts to correcting their upside-down perception. The neurotic person devotes their energy to compromise. The psychotic tries to escape by establishing the truth of their own errors. It is most difficult to free the neurotic or the psychotic. To free them, it is most difficult to free the neurotic or the psychotic by ordinary means, only because the psychotic is more stable in their denial of truth. The truly creative devote their efforts to correcting the ego. The neurotic devotes their efforts to compromise in the split levels. The psychotic tries to escape altogether by establishing the truth of their own errors. And it's most difficult to free the psychotic one by ordinary means, only because the psychotic one is more stable in his denial of truth.